When survival stops being theory, you need to hear this, because the most powerful survival tool of World War II wasn't a weapon, a bunker, or a clever escape plan. It was something far quieter, something so ordinary that most people walk past it today without a second glance. Yet this simple device kept entire families alive while power grids failed, fuel vanished, and supply chains collapsed overnight. And if you understand how it worked, you'll walk away with a skill you can apply immediately, even in a modern home. Now let me take you back for a moment. Picture a winter night in 1943. The wind pushes through the cracks of an old farmhouse. The kitchen shelves are thinning because ration coupons no longer stretch as far as they did last month. A single lamp flickers in the corner, not because it's cosy, but because electricity has been unreliable for weeks. Down in the pantry, a few burlap sacks of grain sit untouched. Not because the family forgot them, but because those calories were locked behind a problem most modern people never consider. This is where true survival begins, not with glamorous gear, but with the quiet realization that life depends on tools that do not rely on grids, engines, or fuel deliveries. Tools that transform scarcity into certainty. Today we rediscover one of them. Make sure you like, share, comment and subscribe to The Hard Past, because the knowledge you're about to gain isn't just history, it's survival. Understanding why this tool mattered requires stepping into the reality of the 1940s, where every system we take for granted today was fragile or non-existent. Supply ships crossing the Atlantic were sunk without warning. Freight trains were rerouted for military use, leaving civilian shipments delayed for weeks. Coal yards ran dry as fuel was diverted to factories. Even in cities, blackouts became routine. Families cooked by candlelight and heated water over wood stoves because modern infrastructure had reached its limit. Food, once taken for granted, became unpredictable. Not because people were lazy or unprepared, but because global logistics had collapsed under the weight of war. When the system fails, you discover that everything you assumed was normal life is really a fragile chain held together by millions of moving parts. That's why wartime families didn't wait for rescue. They built resilience into their daily routines, trusting tools that worked as reliably in freezing barns and blackout kitchens as they did on sunny days. Governments around the world encourage families to store whole grains rather than flour. Whole grains last longer, resist insects, and remain stable through humidity changes. They are one of the safest forms of long-term food security humanity has ever relied on. But there was a problem so simple most modern people forget entirely. Whole grain cannot feed you unless you can process it. You can have a year's worth of calories sitting safely in sacks, yet without a way to turn each kernel into bread, porridge or feed, it is locked energy. Town mills were overworked, underpowered or shut down. Electric grinders were rare and handheld pestles painfully slow. Families needed something faster, sturdier, and built for daily use. Without it, their entire food supply was just a promise they couldn't fulfill. In thousands of wartime kitchens, from the plains of Kansas to rural France, one device sat bolted to a table, a windowsill, or the edge of a feed bin. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't modern, and, well, it looked painfully ordinary. Yet it turned raw survival into a daily livable routine. A cast-iron frame, a turning handle, two steel burrs grinding against one another, simple by design, but essential in function. It required no electricity, no fuel, and no parts. Thick cast-iron bodies absorbed vibration and promised durability. Hardened steel burrs maintained consistent cutting geometry. Every surface could be disassembled and repaired with basic tools. There were no sealed motors, no fragile plastic components, and no proprietary parts. Adjusting the burrs transformed a single tool into a universal processor. For families facing empty shelves, this adaptability was the difference between hunger and survival. In thousands of homes, food wasn't a grocery store delivery, it was a mini-economy engineered by the family. Whole grains stored in sealed barrels, the mill bolted to the workbench, and a fire ready to cook the ground grain. Each part required no external infrastructure. The system endured blackouts, ration shortages, or transport delays. Families who mastered it didn't just survive, they thrived. Modern kitchens are full of fast, fragile appliances, but the handmill reminds us that durability, repairability, and simplicity are the true measures of resilience. A family with grain, fire, and a reliable mill has more food security than one filled with electric gadgets. Routine, habit, and mastery of simple systems matter far more than speed or convenience. When you hold a wartime hand-cranked mill, you're not just holding cast iron. You're holding decades of knowledge engineered under pressure. A tool that fed families when grids failed and fuel disappeared still has lessons for us today. In a world dependent on fragile systems, rediscovering these tools and skills is more than nostalgia. It's a blueprint for real security.